The Order of Light presents We Are the Disclosure, episode 17. With our guest, Jade Lore, as we explore the extraterrestrial phenomenon. Now is the time for those with experiences to speak. We are not waiting for the disclosure. We are the disclosure.
Hello, all of you wonderful light beings out there. I'm Robert Earl White.
Hi, I'm Josh Miota.
With our special guest, Jade Lore. Hello.
Hey.
And together,
we are the disclosure. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Tonight we have an amazing episode with Jade Lore from the YouTube channel Compounding Infinity, where she covers a lot of books on the extraterrestrial and UFO phenomena and many other aspects of this phenomena as well. Great detail, great channel, and she has a story to tell of quite a few amazing experiences she's had through her life. And Jade, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, who you are, what you do, blah, blah, blah.
Hello, everyone. I go by Jade Lore. I live out on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. I kind of started this whole thing as a medium, I guess you could say, though I didn't really do too much work with, connecting people with loved ones or anything. I just kind of observed things that happened to me, and anytime I could offer, any kind of help in that regard, I would. And then after that, I started communicating with my guides more, felt more rooted in my spirituality, and was told one interesting day that I'd be working with extraterrestrials. And I was kind of like, what? And since then, it's kind of been an interesting experience.
So it's a journey, a slow process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Jade, at what age, when and where, at what point, because it sounds like this has been with you throughout your whole entire life. So at what point did you have an experience where you said, whoa, there is a lot more going on than what other people are aware of around me? What was that first big experience that led you on this journey that you are on now?
So I was either in, I think it was fourth or fifth grade. I was very, very young, and my sister's 2 years younger than me. So we were at on my dad's side, one of his sister's house. And it was kind of like almost like a mini family reunion, but not really. It was just us and a couple of my aunts and my dad. And, me and my sister were there kind of just like hanging out, but we were the only two kids there. So we just kind of were like bored because there wasn't like a TV to watch anything on, because they kind of had their stuff on, and they're talking about adult stuff, and we're just kind of like, oh, this sucks, this is boring. So I remember at one point my sister like just disappeared all of a sudden, and I'm just kind of like this, and I'm like, where's my sister? So I kind of like walk around. She had this apartment, so I'm like walking around the apartment. There's not that many rooms or anything, and there's like a spare bedroom. And I walk into the bedroom, and there's my sister sitting on the floor, like laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? And I look up, and there's this like old white woman sitting on the bed. And I'm kind of like, hi. And my first thought was like, why didn't they introduce us to her? Because like they introduced us to everyone else. So I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. Maybe she can't walk or something, and she has to stay like in bed. And the old lady, she like looked up at me, and she was like, do you want to come sit with us? And I was like, yeah, there's nothing else to do. So I sit down like kind of by the door, sitting next to my sister, but I'm still in the room. And, I'm kind of just like, well, why didn't they introduce us to you? Like, I didn't think it was weird that, she was white or anything, even though like my dad's side, like very dark skin is normal. But I just remember like being more concerned that they didn't introduce us. And I thought it was like kind of rude. And I was like wondering, like, are they just keeping her in here and ignoring her? Like, is this kind of like an abusive thing, you know? So when I said that, she was like, oh no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I think she could tell that I was like ready to get up and be like, well, why didn't you guys introduce us? Because she was like, hey, you want to see something?
Why are you storing an old white woman up in what are you doing?
Right. Like, what's going on here? So she could tell because I kept pestering her about it. Like, that was my main thing. And like, why didn't they say anything? Like, they could have acknowledged her existence, and they didn't. So I remember she was kind of like, hey, you want to see something? You want to see something funny? And I'm like, sure. And she popped her leg off. Like, she had a prosthetic leg. And I was like, whoa. Because I never saw anything like that before. And my sister's just kind of like, ooh. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, right? So I like remember just kind of bringing it up again. Like, well, why are you in here by yourself? Like, aren't you lonely? And she's like, no. I have you two here to keep me company. And we're both just like, oh, okay. Whatever. We're pretty young at this point. So I remember my dad kind of like walking by and being like, hey, it's time to go. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to definitely ask now. And we were like, we don't want to leave you. Are you going to be okay? She's like, I'll be fine. Go ahead. Go to your father. Go to your father. And we're like, okay. So we go out and we run up to him and we're both kind of like this. And our aunts are behind us and they're like, bye. And we're like, why didn't you guys introduce us to the old lady? And they're like, what old lady? What are you talking about? And we're like, the old lady in the bedroom over there. And they're like looking at each other. Then they all start laughing. And we're like, what are they laughing about? I was really mad. My sister was just kind of like, and I was like, Dad, why? How did you guys do that? Like, why are you keeping her in there by herself? And he's just like looking at his sisters and they kind of just like, and he's like, all right, it's time to go. Whatever you guys are talking, let's go. And we're like, no, she's in there. And he's like, come on, we got to go. So we ended up leaving and that was that. And I remember pestering him like one more time in the car about it. And he was just kind of like, there is no old lady. I don't know what you're talking about. So we kind of just left it at that. And then I remember how old was I? I had just got out of college. So probably like 19, 20. And my sister calls me up and she's like, hey, I have a weird question for you. And I'm like, okay, what? And she's like, you remember that old lady at Aunt Jackie's house? And I'm like, oh yeah. She had like white curly hair, white skin. She had this like blue, navy-ish blue dress with little white flowers on, pink slippers, and one leg. And my sister was like, oh my God. I thought I made that up. I thought I made that totally up. Like, remember Dad was like telling us that she didn't exist. And I was like, oh no, I remember her like very vividly. And she was like, well, why was Dad acting like she wasn't there? And I'm like, I don't know. That's really weird. We should talk to him about that. So I remember like within the next week, we go over to his house and we're like, hey, remember Aunt Jackie's house when we were telling you about that old lady? And he was like, yeah, I remember that. That was weird. And we were like, no, there really was an old lady there. And he's like, what? I thought you guys were kidding around. And we're like, no, but she was there. I saw her. She popped off her leg. And he's like, what? And I kind of explained everything that happened. And I remember him just kind of having this like really confused look. He's like, you guys sure you didn't make that up? And Saeed is like, no, I saw her. She saw her. We described her exactly the same. And I remember my dad just being like, and making a face like that and like turning around. And we're like, what?
Uh-oh.
And he got really quiet. My dad never gets quiet like that. He got really quiet, didn't say anything for like a minute. And we're like looking at each other. And we're like, what? And he's like, well, that's just really weird because, when I was a kid, we used to make fun of my one uncle. It might have been like a great uncle or something. And I'm not really too familiar with a lot of people on my dad's side just because my parents are older. Like I'm 28, my dad's 75. So there's like a big age gap. So he said when he was younger that him and his like cousins would like play and everything. And they'd make fun of this one uncle that like ran away with a white woman with one leg. And we're kind of like looking at him like, did you just make that up? He's like, no, I'm 100% serious. And I don't remember ever telling you that. And we're like, we've never heard this before. And I remember like just his face was so like, he was kind of like, well, why would she want to talk to you? And we're like, I don't know, And I remember being like excited because I've always had conversations with my dad about any kind of paranormal thing. Cause I've had so many like with ghosts of people like on the verge of death coming to me with these messages and then they die. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I remember telling him every single one. And he still doesn't believe in like ghosts or any paranormal stuff like in that arena. So I remember being like, well, do you believe now? And he's like, no, I don't think ghosts. And I'm like, we just told you. I couldn't believe that he didn't like believe after that. But I remember that being the most prolific thing that really kind of jump started me being like
that.
Okay.
That's the experience. And Josh, any questions to that one?
Jade, do you remember her mentioning a name to you at all?
No name. It was very brief, she just popped her leg off.
Probably like 5 minutes you were in the room?
Yeah, couldn't be more than like 8 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Wow. And what you're saying about seeing that leg, I had a Uncle James, and we grew up and he made a lie saying he lost his leg from an alligator. We live in New Jersey. We don't have alligators. He blew his leg off by a shotgun blast by accident. It was a hunting accident. But I remember the first time I saw that leg come off, and it really, really stuck to me. It was a pivotal moment. And your description of her, down to her slippers, the patterns on her thing, this being, it seemed absolutely physical. Like you couldn't tell the difference between this older white woman and another family or friend. You couldn't tell the difference from any other human. It was that physical.
Yeah, like I remember never even it crossed my mind that it was a ghost or anything because she just looked physical. And the only thing I was concerned about was why were they ignoring her? And like as I got older, it kind of occurred to me like maybe she wasn't there, but we both saw the exact same thing. And I know for a fact she was there.
And you heard she was talking to you.
Yeah.
So with that being said, now she was communicating, but when she was moving around and popping that leg off, was there sound with that?
I don't remember a sound. I just remember like when she kind of shifted, like it kind of sounded like, a person moving because she was sitting on bed. Yeah, but her leg coming off didn't really make a sound. I remember the plastic of her leg was like this darker brown color, and it didn't look like a very like high tech leg. It just looked like something like very plastic. And her slipper was like the foot there wasn't like much articulation with it. Like I could tell if she were to like get up and walk, you might be able to tell that she had a prosthetic leg, but I wasn't really concerned with that. I just remember the plastic being like almost like a chocolatey brown kind of, maybe with a little bit maybe more like a reddish brown, and the foot being in like a slipper, like a pink like fuzzy-ish slipper.
And what you're mentioning of that brown color, I'm positive if we looked up, if we found the exact date of when that woman would have, bought that leg and found out the different styles and stuff, I guarantee you it would be the same color matching to that old style, because old legs back in the day were quite hideous, quite hideous. So they weren't like the ones that we have now that almost look like a real leg. They were harsh. Wow. And your sister, she was seeing this too and talking to this. And, we know after a short time of talking to you that you've had a lot of other experiences as well. Did your sister also continue to have experiences, or was that her one and done?
She did, but she mostly blocks them out because she's a very fearful person. So that didn't really scare either of us because we thought we were just having a conversation with an old woman. It never occurred to either of us that it was a ghost until much later when, my sister started to doubt herself. But I remember she told me recently that she has to play like nature sounds at night, because if she just were to try and go to sleep just regularly, she can hear like conversations. And I'm like that too. Like I can hear just the most random conversations. Like if I was in a room with like maybe 7 or 8 people, like all talking, sometimes even more, and I'll pick up on different parts of conversations. So I also kind of listen to, rain sounds and stuff at night, so I don't hear that. But I've kind of gotten a lot better at like blocking it out and opening it up when I want to hear or perceive anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But my clairvoyance, like seeing things, hasn't been as strong as it was back when I saw that old woman. It's more like clairaudience.
Wow. And what you're saying about these conversations and voices, would you describe them as talking at the same volume we are, a whispering, or does it sound like normal talking, but like underwater, or that there's some sort of electrical interference with how these voices sound? How would you describe them?
It sounds like basically people just like kind of talking about random stuff, like and then that blah, 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 and they're like at that kind of level, just a regular conversation voice. No type of interference or anything like that. Sometimes I'll get like ringing in my ear, but usually when I hear these like conversations, it's just there's people in the background, and then sometimes a part of a conversation will be a tiny bit louder, like a couple of words will be louder, and I try to listen and keep track of what was louder and what was softer. But sometimes there's just so many conversations going on that I'm just kind of like, I don't know what this means.
It's overlapping, and certain parts are a little louder than others. So, every now and then you get one that really stands out, but when there's so many going on, they just overlap. Wow.
Yeah.
That must be hard to sleep and deal with. And this happened to you as you were a kid too?
Yeah.
Your whole life.
Yeah, it's never stopped. Ever since I really remember anything, it's always been something paranormal. But I've always been really open with accepting it. My sister's kind of the opposite. Like when my neighbor died at my old house, like I saw like through my third eye. So my clairvoyance was still kind of there, but I knew like it was like the real world was an overlay, and then there was like another, like if the opacity was turned down on a picture and you could see through it kind of, I could see that like 2 worlds kind of overlapping at the same time. And I saw him come through my wall, and like he was a pervert, so he was kind of saying some pervy stuff, and I was just like, ugh. And around that same time, somebody at my old job had committed suicide, and I didn't really know anybody that well yet. Like I had just started, and I just knew that we had similar music tastes. Like he liked specifically this band called Catatonia. It's like I don't know, like doom metal band or whatever. And I remember him being surprised that I even knew who they were. But he stopped showing up to work, and I just remember being like, oh, that sucks. Like, I hope he comes back and he's like better. And I went to bed one night with my boyfriend, and I remember we went to bed so early because we both worked like these weird shifts, because he was a police officer and I was a dispatcher. And we went to bed really early. And I remember like having this really vivid dream that I was back at work, and the girl that he had like a romantic interest in, I turned around to her and I was like, it's not your fault, right? And she said, I know, I just feel like it is. And I was like, it's not your fault. And I remember knowing exactly what we were talking about, even though the dream was so brief. We were talking about him killing himself. And I remember waking up and being so disturbed that I woke my boyfriend up and was like, I just had this weird dream. And I remember looking at the clock. It was like so early. It was like 10:30 or something. And he's like, well, it's really weird. Just go to bed. Because I remember talking to him about it. Like, he hasn't shown up to work in like a week. And he's like, oh, and I remember talking to the guys at work, because they knew him for years, and they're like, oh, he's just drinking, like, blah, 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 he'll be back.
He's on a binger.
Exactly. He's like on a bender. And I was like, well, all right. So I remember I woken up and I was working afternoon, so it was 2:30 to 10:30. And I had gotten dressed and everything with my uniform, and I was kind of like sitting on the couch like, you remember that dream I told you about last night? And my boyfriend, like, at this point already knows. I've told him all of my like paranormal experiences up until now. So he's kind of aware, like he's not scared of me, but he just knows anytime I say something like that, it's true. So I remember him being really concerned and being like, yeah, I remember that dream, but there's really nothing you can do about it. Just go to work and, try to just go get through the day. And I was like, yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to probably go now. And I remember I stood up and my phone rang. And I remember his face just being like, and me looking at him, and he's like, answer it.
You put that phone down.
Yeah.
Put it over there.
I was like, oh, okay, God, like, what's going on? And he's like, pick it up. And I look, and he's like, who is it? And I'm like, it's work. And he's like, pick it up. And I'm like, all right. So I pick it up, and I'm like, hello. And it's my shift commander. And she said, hey, we just wanted to let you know before you got into work today, he shot himself last night. I'm not going to say his name, obviously, but he killed himself last night. Just wanted to let you know before you got in here. And it must have been loud enough that my boyfriend heard, because like all the color had drained from his face, and he's just standing there. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I hung up the phone, and I looked at him, and he was just kind of like, I kind of just was like, I gotta go, I guess. So it was really strange. And I told my dad about it, and he was like, there's really nothing you can do. But I thought, there was a reason why he gave me that dream, because right after that, the girl he had interest in, like, they started treating her like horribly. Like they were blaming it on her. And I was like, I'm supposed to be her friend. So I was like really supportive of her while I was still working there. And then I remember this at one point I went home, and I'm an artist, I like to draw and paint, but I don't really paint that much. I just kind of like might sketch a little bit, and that was it. I remember like getting this overwhelming feeling that I needed to paint something. And I was listening to Catatonia, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to paint. And I like picked up all my paint stuff, and then I just like started painting, and this song came on, and it was called Sold Heart. And I thought I had listened to all of Catatonia's music at this point, and I hadn't, because I hadn't heard the song before. And the lyrics were so specific to what happened, because he like shot himself in the heart. And the song is Sold Heart, and he's talking about how he loved this woman, and he was dead, and will you still visit my grave and stuff like that. And it was really, really weird. And I almost felt like I was in a trance. And I painted this picture. It was these like rain clouds with a night sky, and there were comets raining out of the clouds. And I'm like, I'm supposed to give this to her. But I felt so strange about it that I was just like, I can't. She's going to think I'm freaking crazy, because I just started here. So I remember years went by, and I still had this painting. And over this time, I had quit working there. I was trying to like understand more about like, why do people keep telling me, like coming to me right before they die? Because it happened with my grandmother too. I heard this voice in my left ear saying, you better hug her now, because you'll never be able to hug her again. And I remember not even being scared. I gave her this really long hug, and she like, we didn't really get along. So I remember like her letting go earlier, and I was still hugging her. And then we left, and she died that weekend. Like, she literally 2 days later was dead. And I was trying to figure out like, why does this keep happening? Because I can't stop them from dying. Like, what does this mean?
It's a good point. Why are you seeing the ones that are dead? Why aren't you seeing other people's consciousness while they're alive? Why aren't they visiting you while you're alive? And it goes back to that veil. And Josh may have some questions about your coworker that unfortunately took his own life. That's devastating to hear. And Jade, no doubt that you've had a lot of different experiences of people visiting you, hearing people that you don't know who they are, seeing this old white woman, you had no idea who she was, but this was a coworker. And paranormal out of this, what was your emotions of like someone you knew and worked with would do this? And did it have an impact on you, and how did you work through that?
I remember first feeling really bad that he was in such a bad mental place that, that was the only, way he felt like he could resolve that. And I remember, I can say this now, I guess, because I don't work there anymore, but I was a dispatcher. So I was able to like look up the call, that they got when, the 911 was called, and he died right around the time that I woke up. And I just remember like that whole day at work, I just kind of was just really quiet. Everyone was really upset. But I just felt bad because when I pulled out those paints and started painting, I felt like I was feeling his emotions because I was sobbing like while I'm painting this. And I just kind of like let the feelings wash over me. And I felt like insane regret. I felt like sadness, like I made a mistake, but it wasn't my feelings. It was like his feelings. And after the painting was done, like I just stopped. And years later, I was able to finally like message her and be like, hey, remember that painting I told you about? I really, really need to give it to you. Because he came to me again and was like, I can't rest until she has that. And so I was able to send it to her, and then I haven't heard from him again because he'd come to me in dreams and stuff like that. But I just remember being really upset that I couldn't do more, because maybe if I'd like known that he was feeling this bad, maybe I could have said something. But I also was new, and he probably didn't want to hear anything from me. But it did give me a little bit of like, I felt good that I was able to at least do
Closure.
that. Yeah.
Closure.
Mm-hmm.
And it stopped, you said, after you did that painting? It
Yeah,
stopped.
I didn't see him again.
Wow. Josh, do you have anything to
I have a
add?
couple things. Each time you saw a spirit, I guess I'll say, did you see anything else, like a color, like their aura, or was it just like looking at a person?
So in the beginning, when I saw the old woman, she looked 3D. She looked like a person. But anytime I would see like spirits after that, if I saw them, because it would be very, very transparent, and I knew I was like looking through here, and it wasn't like through here.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like a transparent, like bluish, clearish white, if that makes any sense. It was always very transparent. Sometimes people would appear as a very, very light teal or green, but it was usually like a light gray or blue color that I would see. And that's like the best description I could give that I saw. But my hearing has remained very clear. It's just my clairvoyance isn't that clear anymore.
Wow. And
one other thing I had too, your first time when you saw the old woman, did you feel any cold spots, like temperature change? Do you remember?
I think I would have probably remembered that. I didn't really feel anything. I just kind of was more like intrigued by the leg and this old woman. I don't remember being cold though, but I do get these really random like shivers every once in a while. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's something, but at the time I don't really remember feeling anything cold.
wow. And this all goes back to, as you were mentioning, why is it you? Well, why was it you and your sister that saw that old woman? Why was it you that a coworker at a new job of someone that you just knew, and hey, we have one band in common. That's our middle talking point to kind of become friends. Why are you the one that they're going to, which really goes back to some of your abilities. You're guilty because of your abilities, and it almost makes you, in a vicinity, maybe not everyone is able to communicate or see that in the same way. So maybe you're just a beacon. Maybe that coworker and maybe that woman when you were a kid, maybe they try to get your dad and your other family members to see them, but maybe your dad said you didn't see it. Your aunts, they had no idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's clearly something to do with your abilities, which that must have been a lot. And when you were seeing these things, Jade, did you keep to yourself as a kid and getting older, or did you talk to friends, or was that not until you were, a lot older?
I would tell my mom. I told my mom about what happened at my grandmother's house after she died. And she was like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, I wasn't supposed to tell you. I couldn't tell you. And I think it was because she wanted to die alone. She died in her sleep, and we lived about an hour away almost. And I remember my mom saying that she saw her after the fact. And she just said, I'm all right. And she was like all in white. And my mom was sitting out in the backyard smoking a cigarette and just saw her. And there was like this light next to her that she could tell was a person, but it just had like the shape. And she just said, I'm all right. And then just disappeared. So it definitely runs in the family, because I've heard like my cousins and or nieces and stuff talk about this stuff too. But they don't really tap into it as much as I do. So they kind of just let it dissipate over time.
Yeah, that's that probably answered one of Josh and mine, our questions we always ask about people's parents and experiencers. And your mother saw her mother, correct? Mm-hmm. Was it her mother? Saw her mother in the backyard as this, light being, we could say, in her purest form. I like that one. And that's incredible. And, it would be one thing if it was just you, but your mother and your sister, it definitely seems to be something in the family. Now, your father, did he have any experiences that were a little out there, a little unusual?
Yeah, actually. So my dad's a little different. He doesn't really have like the ghostly experiences, but I probably can say this, right? So he was actually in the Rosicrucians while he was growing up, which I didn't find out. Yeah, I didn't know that until like last year. I was getting more into like shamanism and everything like that, and I remember telling him about this like wild experience that I had, seeing my higher self for the first time, but he was in the form of a bear, and just telling him about all this stuff. And he's like oddly like very relaxed about it, and he's just like, oh yeah, well that probably means this. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And he's like, well, wow, F it, I guess I can tell you now. And I'm like, wait, does this have anything to do with like an altar that you used to have? Because as kids, right back there on his desk, there used to be this like yellow candle with this like rainbow wax, and there were these like this cross. And I remember like always wondering what it was and picking the wax off of it. And he was like, yeah, that was my altar. And I was like, wait, you had an altar? And he's like, yeah, I was part of this organization. You're not really supposed to talk about it, but I'm not in it anymore. He was like, I wasn't in it that long anyway, but I was in this organization called the Rosicrucians, and they kind of talk about, astral projection and stuff like that. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, Dad. Like, why didn't you ever tell me about it? And he was like, I just didn't really have an idea, So
you don't talk about it. That's why.
Yeah, that too. You don't talk about it.
You live it. You practice it. You don't talk about it. Talk is cheap. You just live it.
Right.
And going back to the Rosicrucians and the connections to Templarism, the shield, the energetic shield of the Templars, the Merkaba light body, protection, astral, consciousness existing on the metaphysical, expansion of the universe. All of these teachings are deeply embedded within those teachings. Very interesting. Interesting guy.
Very. So he's always been very supportive of that. And I remember him like asking me, what's my spirit guide? Like, what's his name? And I was able to sitting on the couch with my mom one day, and I was like, I wonder what his name is. And then I just heard it in my ear. He goes by this name. And I was like, oh, okay. That's how I would get these things, sometimes through dreams. But he was very supportive on my journey and everything. And he would always offer ideas on what this could possibly mean. And then he's like, this makes me want to get back into the Rosicrucians and learn more about astral projection, because that's always been something he's really interested in. And I remember like brewing, like mixing all these herbs together to make astral tea and having him try it and everything. But he had some really interesting experiences with numbers. Like he's had like 3 or 4 chances to play the lottery with the exact numbers. Like he once got the numbers in a dream from his dead friend. He once got the numbers like going to a hotel and seeing the numbers like on a door and hearing this like high-pitched ringing in his ear. And he was like, I got to play these numbers. He was always about those numbers. And then he said at the time I was drinking too much, so I didn't go play them. And then the numbers hit. He's like, it's happened like three times. He did play once and won, and the numbers were 666, which is hilarious. That was the time his dead friend told him in a dream. And my mom, she said he was like talking in his sleep. And he was like, she's like, you were just going on and on and on, blah, 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 blah. You must have been having a good dream. And you were doing like this with your face. And he was like, what? Because the guy that he was talking to, he said, I forget what his nickname was. It might have been like Frog or something. But he said that this guy, when he got really drunk, they could tell because he'd start going like this with his face.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's really weird, Dad. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, you still don't believe in ghosts? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, you're talking to your dead friend, giving you winning lotto numbers and drinking with him.
And he just kind of like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
wow.
We could have been rich.
Could have been rich. And so once again, your father, your mother, your sister, it sounds like you got it from both sides. You got a double dose of, you know, and I also believe everyone has these abilities.
For sure.
We just forget how to use them. And it seems like there's something to your experience that kind of sparked things, you know, and probably going back to that old woman you saw, and especially how physical it was, you know, versus seeing something that's in a shadow, or, you know, hearing something in your mind or having a download or a vision. That's one thing. But when you have these things and it is reality, you see your coworker the following day, he took his own life. Same thing, you know, your neighbor, your grandmother, you know, last time you're going to hug her. All right, I got it. You know, you get these little intuitions, you know, it's clairvoyancy to see not too far into the future,
right?
But it seems like it's within like a 15-minute, or not even necessarily in the past or future. There's no such thing as time. It just seems like the time, when the time is right, that's when it happens, when that veil is the thinnest in between that person's consciousness and our reality. And it seems like you're that person that is standing right here near that line. And when these people start to go through that line, you're the last one they can reach out to, because everyone else is all the way over here. And it just seems like you're a little closer to that line.
Right.
And with that being said, Jade, so, you know, most of these experiences have been, you know, real people you knew. And the paranormal and the extraterrestrial phenomena, you know, two sides of the same coin. These beings, whether it's a human soul consciousness or some sort of earth energy or galactic energy or being, multiple different frequencies, vibrations, realities, and dimensions, right?
Yes.
So with that being said, if you're seeing spirits and people that are passing and having these little intuitions and this clairvoyancy, have you had or picked up on anything other than, you know, people that you knew passing? And how and when did that start to kind of progress, and what went down?
So it's really funny. I started doing more like ancestral work, though I haven't like gone way back in my ancestral lines. Mostly, you know, a couple of generations out, and I'll talk to them and everything, and started like really connecting with my roots and spirituality and everything like that, and talking to my guides who would present themselves and with the synchronicities and everything like that. So I remember actually around COVID, like right when COVID hit and everybody went on lockdown, is when I really was like into my spirituality, like heavily. And I remember like a family member of mine that I had ended up meeting at that time, basically was like, you're a shaman, like, girl, you're a shaman. And I remember I've always like been really hyper fixated on the movie Interstellar, and I'd watch it like so many times. And I remember one day getting a download. That's what I call them. I'm sure a lot of people do, from my guides. And they're like, my best friend that I've had for years, over a decade, you have to get her to watch Interstellar with you. And I was like, okay, I'll try. But she's not really into like watching and reading and listening to new stuff that I recommend right off the bat. But they were like, no, this is serious. You have to watch it with her. And I'm like, okay. And I remember at the time she started talking about black holes a lot. So I kind of was like, hey, we should watch Interstellar. And it's like late at night. Like we didn't finish watching till like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we watched it, and I remember her just being so into it. And I remember like just, sometimes you can feel like the vibrations kind of like rising, if that makes any sense. And I can feel my vibration like rising really high for some reason. And once we finished, it was so weird. I was sitting in my room, and the light, like I had a fan, and the light just became so bright all of a sudden. And I just was like looking at it, and I was like, I'm getting a download. And she's like, what is it? Because she's very spiritual too. We've kind of mirrored a lot on our pathways over time. And I said, there's a blue planet. There's a blue planet. We're going to go back there. That's home. And we're going to be talking to extraterrestrials. And she's like, what? And I'm like, and I remember I kept saying, become the pillar of light, become the pillar of light. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So after the fact, we're kind of just like, aliens, like, well, that's new, but I've always believed the aliens are real. Like they have to be. There's no way that we're the only intelligent life. And if it is, it's horrible. But no.
Since you were a kid, just from watching movies,
Always.
TV, that's all,
always believed it.
You always had that belief.
Never was a doubt in my mind. I was like, yeah, they're definitely real. They've definitely been here. So when they said that, I was just kind of like, I'm game, It was weird, but I was like, that's so random. I just started the spiritual journey. Now all of a sudden, like aliens, but okay.
And that was that first point. And you said you were around 26 years old?
Oh, right around the start of COVID. So either 26 or 27.
Okay, wow. So all this paranormal and seeing all this stuff, and then here comes, this download. And going back to your friend and the Interstellar movie, so what came out of it? What was the purpose of watching that with your friend? Was it so you could get a download, or did something happen to your friend?
Yeah, it started getting real crazy. So she definitely, I think it was like an awakening kind of thing, because we both kind of awakened to like that whole aspect at the exact same time. So I remember with me, my guides kept telling me, get on TikTok. And I'm like, that's for kids. Like that app is like a dancing little app for kids. And they're like, no, get on TikTok. And I'm like, all right. So I get on TikTok, and then I see this guy on there talking about the mantis, the Akari. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I'm like so interested. And they were like, and a gift from the stars, and pulled up the book. And I was like, I see why you guys wanted me to get on here. And they're like, get the book. So I got it. And I remember as soon as I got it, in like 2 days, I was done reading it. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this is the real deal. Like, I see what I'm supposed to be doing now. So I started a little series up on TikTok talking about the different ET races and connecting the descriptions in these books to like movies and the show Cosmic Disclosure that I'd been watching, and just, bridging them together and like doing that. And I remember I made this video on TikTok, and someone asked me like, when do you think the extraterrestrials will reveal themselves to us? And I said 2022, and here's why. There's, this passage, I forget exactly what race it was.
The Dries.
The Dries, yes, there was the Dries that talked about revealing themselves in 2022. And then the Fornax, I should have grabbed the book. They had given a message to, I think, Soviet Russia or something, talking about 2022, or this couple of years where the fate of our race,
the humanoid species that were dealing with Russia, told them in an article they found 2022. Exactly. And the Drives with their triangular ships with 5 big, boomerang, they look like giant boomerangs with 5 lights on it. coming
Yeah.
in 22. Yes.
So that's why I said, and then there was another book that people were talking about, like the Anunnaki's final warning and return to Earth in 2022. So I was like, these are three different titles, or two different titles, but three different entries about 2022. So I'm thinking maybe 2022. And I remember like that video blew up and I got all these followers and everything. And then I remember like there was a time where before that whole thing happened, my friend was talking about like star seeds. And I was like, well, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's where you're from. And I remember it really resonating with me. And she said, I don't understand. Mine is like Pleiadian and Syrian. How could you be both? And I'm like, I don't know. And I said, well, I should really look into mine. So I went home and I thought it was like a fun thing. Like, oh, cool. Let's find out. And I'm sitting there looking at this list and I start to scroll and I'm like, ooh, maybe Orion. Ooh, maybe. And then like got cut off immediately by my spirit guides. And they were like Pleiadian. And I was like, dang, y'all not even gonna let me look through the list? And they're like, Pleiadian, we don't have time for this. So after that whole download and starting to do like the series, you know, I started going on these shamanic journeys because I remember at one point I got really depressed because I'm like, I'm broke, you know, COVID, I can't find a job, blah, 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 blah. My guides were just like, make yourself some tea, put on your binaural beats, and just like relax and take a nap or something. And I remember doing it and having this like really vivid like vision of me like coming out of my body. And this, I've astral projected before as a kid, just accidentally floated out of my body, turned around, saw myself, went, and then fell back in. And
Wow.
that was like probably elementary school. I was so young. So I kind of was familiar with the whole idea of floating out of the body and astral projection. So I figured, oh, I'm astral projecting. Okay. But I remember astral projecting and I was on this ship and there's an Akara there, a mantis, and lots of humanoids around this like table. And I'm the one presenting to them. And I'm like, you know, the humans are starting to talk to their ancestors and they're becoming more aware of, you know, like Hinduism and spirituality. And they're really connecting to, you know, this idea during the pandemic, you know, everyone's kind of awakening at the same time and they're all watching me and they're kind of just like going like this. And I said, now is the perfect time for us to, you know, and then I remember like, I'm still talking, but I'm like fading back and I'm coming back and I'm like, am I a spy? Like, what's going on? What is this? But I could tell like what I was talking about was like, you know, a new era, like a new age of just enlightenment and stuff like that. And I could tell like upon like thinking about it later on, like we were talking about, you know, this shift, like, you know, everyone.
Perfect word.
Yeah, it was like that. And I remember being like freaking out, like, what the heck? Told my friend's like driving me around, like, calm down, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then my friend started having these vivid dreams, like super, super vivid. And she writes all of her stuff down. And she'd message me and be like, I had this dream last night. For instance, this dream that she had that kind of started me on my journey of talking to my higher self. She said, I had this dream last night and you were in it, but you were a man. And this is about the second time she's told me that, but I usually show up as like an indigenous person, a Native American, which I learned later on. I've incarnated many times as an indigenous person on planet Earth. So that made sense to me. But this time she was like, you didn't, I was like, oh, was it, I call him Coda. I was like, was it Coda? She's like, no, this wasn't Coda. Like, you looked different. And I'm like, what did I look like? She said, you had like blonde hair, like whitish blonde hair. You had these big blue eyes and your skin was white. Like you were white. And I'm like, really? And she said, yeah, we were sitting in this like auditorium kind of thing. And we were looking at my paperwork. I had this paperwork when we were younger. And it said that I was like a refugee or something like that. Some similar word to refugee from Sirius. And she was like, but I knew in the dream that we were in the Pleiades. And I was like, that makes sense. So I always run and grab my gift from the stars. Like that's my reference for everything, right? So I pull it up and I'm like, all right. I look in the Sirius and I'm like, okay, maybe you were from like Ashkara because they had, you know, the thing with the reptilians. And then I'm like, I remember my guides telling me I was a Pleiadian starseed. So I look at the Pleiades and I happen upon Era. like the planet Era and the Era Hell. And I remember like looking and I was like, did I look like this? And showed her Elena's illustration. And she's like, yeah, only you had blue eyes and blonde hair. And I was like, yeah, they said that they have like the same.
It's a black and white picture. She didn't know.
Yeah, it's in black and white. Yeah. She's like, yeah, but you had blue eyes and blonde hair. And I was like, oh my God.
That's what they have.
And that's what I said. I was like, that's what they have. And I read her the description and she was like, oh my God. And then I was like, could that be why when you asked about your starseed origins, it said Sirius and Pleiades? Because maybe you were originally from Sirius, but you were living on the Pleiades for most of your life. And she was like, holy crap. And then it just exploded from there.
Convoy was the word you were looking for. Refugee, convoy. And as you're mentioning, Josh knows this as well. You know, these beings starting from Lyra, the mass exodus, they literally created Pleiades. They went through and they have done the same thing all throughout the galaxy, which that's why when you first open up and you were going through that list, you just wanted to check it all out. Because at some point or another, you probably visited or you went to those places. But at the heart of it, for most humanoids, it goes back to Lyra if you go back far enough. But I mean, that's ancient. More relevant would be Pleiades, Sirius, Centauri, all these places. That's amazing. Josh, any questions pertaining to her guys and, you know, some of her connections with her?
It's very awesome. When did you first start seeing your guide?
Oh, so it was like, I think right around, she told me that dream and I was like, that makes sense. And I actually drew a picture of him I sent to you. And he had like the aquiline nose and everything. So I remember after that shamanic journey and her telling me about that dream and me reading about Era and the Era Hell race and all the history of these other beings, I was like, okay, this makes sense. This all resonates. Like I felt like the pieces of the puzzle were like coming together. So I remember like meeting another shaman and her being like, you should go on more shamanic journeys. Like, you're just kind of like going with the flow and letting things come to you. And she's like, you should be going out and like asking, seeking
it, not just letting it come to you. Yeah.
Right. And she's like, it'll go a lot quicker if you do it that way. So I remember I found this playlist of like shamanic drumming and that thing is powerful and popping it in, you know, laying down. Cause I used to do like the binaural beats, but I find the shamanic drumming is way more powerful. And I like will get into this meditative state and instantly I'd be going places like, but before I go anywhere, I'd go within. So I would imagine myself as a planet and I'd imagine myself dropping into the core of that planet. And then I remember coming out and being on this ship and I could tell it was like the regular like UFO discoidal, you know, type of ship. And who was right in front of me? It's him, me as a Pleiadian. And we're having these conversations and he's telling me like, you have to make this series. This is what we plan to do in this lifetime. You're supposed to be here to teach. And I had a dream corresponding to that. Like I was in this old abandoned classroom and we went to the basement of the classroom, like underground. And I was there with one of my old teachers and we're turning on these lights in these classrooms, dusting, you know, cleaning it up. And he turns around to me and he says, you need to awaken this older hidden knowledge. And I was like, okay. So when he said that, I kind of thought back to that dream and was like, okay, that makes sense. So I remember like, I always had a natural inclination to like hoard books anyway and like read 50 books on the same subject just so I could piece together any missing parts that one book might have. And, you know, so that made sense to me. And then usually I go a couple times a week on these shamanic journeys and talk to him and, you know, go on these different like adventures. Like I remember one shamanic journey in particular. I'm in this like sinking into this black hole. And then on the other side is like this different universe. Like the sky was this whitish color and the stars it was almost like if you took a picture and it was like negative and the stars were like darker and there were these like planets being born. And I remember like just creation was unfolding. And then I remember looking up because I heard this like And I look up and I see, it almost looks like a sun, and it's like streaking across the sky, and it's spitting out these stars and these planets and like this, like, it looked like dimensions. It's very hard to explain, but it was just a regular shamanic journey. And I remember seeing that and being like, what is that? Like, is this like source or something? So I remember like wanting to go near it and wanting to hug it. And then on another occasion, I remember seeing these, like, they looked like humans, like humanoids, but they were like completely white, like how you would, I guess, imagine a light being. And they were like, there was this like stream of like stars and sky, and they were pulling these souls, like these orbs out of it, and they were distributing them amongst the cosmos. And I'm just watching them. And I remember one of them looked over and saw me and then just kind of went back to what he was doing. And I just remember being on a field, it was like a field trip that I was supposed to be seeing all of these things. And my friend, like, I told her about it thinking like, I don't know what that was. And she's like, oh, it sounds like the astral post office. And I'm like, what? Like, what is that? But
it sounds like, you know, the cosmic source energy. It seemed like its headquarters where it operates and filters out its source energy, because source energy is found within everything, and it creates, and it kind of sounds like you were witnessing that. And when you had these experiences, going back, I want to bring this up briefly, the drums, were you listening to the drums?
Yes.
You know, planets have a drum beat. They have a heartbeat. And the reason why my native cultures and other native cultures use drums is because of these frequencies and that representation of the heartbeat of the galaxy, which is not just this planet. And what you were saying as when you had it, you were kind of going to this planet, this area, and then you went to the ship and you saw, you know, yourself in a different time, we can say. It's no such thing as time. But it's just really interesting that you're having these experiences with these tribal drum tones, and it really gives more credibility to why these native people use them to begin with. It's to resonate and connect your heartbeat with the heartbeat of Earth, with the heartbeat of the universe, to the heartbeat of the creator source energy. And she's beautiful. And it sounded like you saw her flying all around, shooting out cosmos, dimensions, stars, transferring souls, everything like that.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I, like, looking back at it now, I'm able to understand why I may have, like, I felt like, I feel like thank you for letting me have this experience. But it also makes sense to me. Sorry, I have allergies. It makes sense to me too, because if I'm supposed to be, like, you know, digging up all of these books and cross-referencing them, like, I should have some knowledge of, like, you know, what's going on in the, you know, cosmos and stuff like that. And talking with my higher self, able to, like, learn more about, like, why I came here, learn a little tiny bit about, like, what I was doing on Era. I had an Akashic reading actually very recently that kind of tied all that together for me. And it was crazy how much stuff I hadn't said to the person that was giving me the reading. And they were just like, this. Like, they told me about my wife that I had on Era, who is actually my best friend in this lifetime, which is really interesting. They told me about a good friend that I had, because I was a pilot when I was a Pleiadian. Well, I was a Pleiadian a few times, but this most recent lifetime, when I decided to come here, you know, I was a pilot. I was very interested in helping these planets and learning about all these different races and, you know, different atmospheres, different frequencies, different plants, different animals. Like, it was something I was very, very interested in at the time. And I was very, very fascinated with Earth. Like, I remember one of these shamanic journeys, I was, like, kind of depressed that day. And I was like, you know, I was kind of feeling homesick. Like, you know, I feel like in this lifetime, I've been very tired of being a human. Like, I'm just like, I'm tired of this. This is so, I'm getting a little, like, worn out here. So I'm
over it.
Yeah, I'm like over it, but I'm not, because, like, I still want to help. But I remember going on a shamanic journey this time, and I was in this, like, forest, And I'd been there before because I'd had experiences with my higher self there. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm here. And then I remember feeling like something was above me, and there's a UFO. And then I'm in the UFO. And it's very similar to how Elena had drawn that UFO with like the table and the curved seats, everything like had a curve to it. And this woman was sitting next to me, blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin. And I'm like slumped in this chair next to her. And I remember feeling like she had some sort of, not like animosity towards me. She was like disappointed in a way. And I remember like internalizing that and being like, why does she hate me? But it was obviously not hate or anything like that. She was just like sad a bit. And she's like, you asked for this. And I said, what? And she like, it was like almost like a binder that she pulled out, and it had Earth on it. And she was like, these are your notes. You were so fascinated with Earth. And I'm like looking through it and seeing all these notes that I had taken, and talked about Mount Shasta in it, and saw the Telosi, and I'd circled it. And I'm like looking at this like, holy crap, you know? And I remember this person walked behind.
I did this to myself.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense too, because I'd known that, but I think she was just there to remind me of that. And I was just like, wow, okay, I got to like get back on it. You know, I got to get back into this. So started doing all my research, started the YouTube channel, met some awesome people. But yeah, I talked to my higher self a lot and learned a lot about him through this Akashic reading. Learned about a good friend of mine that I had, you know, and now I can go talk to him. It's very interesting. Yeah, with the, you know, I watch a lot of Elena Danaan stuff, Michael Sala, all of that. Just trying to get as much information as possible to bring together. I've noticed one of my recent lessons was that there are people out there that are kind of on this journey, but they're kind of like putting misinformation out there. So I've kind of was like, you know, I got to address that too. So that's kind of been another thing that I've incorporated into my work and everything. So
I've seen that, Jade. A wonderful job. Josh, you've seen The Fourth Kind, right?
Yeah.
Josh, she did an awesome video picking what parts of it, actual abduction experiences, and what parts of that movie was BS that Hollywood put in there to scare people. You know, she picked the whole thing apart, and you've done, I think you did Interstellar too, right?
I should. I haven't done Interstellar yet.
You did another one. You did The Fourth Kind, Disinformation, and what was the other one?
I did, what is that movie called? It had Chris Pratt in it. Oh, what was that one called?
Tomorrow Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow Wars. Yeah.
With the arcs. I love the arc stuff.
Yeah.
That arc episode took so long to do, but I think that's my best work.
And yes, you know, great stuff on your YouTube. And if you want to tell everyone, you know, Jade, before, you know, we wrap it up and stuff, you know, the name of your YouTube and some of the things you're doing and all of that, so people can reach out to you and share their stories, because your story is quite remarkable, and these experiences you are having with these beings simply from looking within yourself. That's how you're doing this, you know. Now, with the paranormal, the spirits and ghosts, they came to you. But with these beings, you're seeking, and you're doing it within yourself. And then as you learn and you read, for example, Elena Danaan's A Gift from the Star, my big sis, love it, you know, and Michael Sala, when you study all these different people out there, each person just gives you a little piece of the puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. And it just validates your experiences and helps you understand them more, and it makes you hungry to learn more and to keep seeking. That's amazing. So, yeah, how can people get a hold of you and send you a message or contact you?
Sure. So I am on YouTube as Compounding Infinity. On TikTok as well, same name. I don't post too frequently to there because I'm kind of focused on my research and posting to YouTube. My email compoundinginfinity@gmail.com if you ever want to talk or reach out or anything like that. I also wanted to share, definitely, I want one of the biggest things, if you don't remember anything about anything that I say, is to use your discernment. That's been a big thing that I've been, kind of trying to implement people to do, especially with my targeted disinformation series. We look at a lot of media that could either be telling you the truth about something that's really going on here, or trying to disinform you about something that may be true. So we kind of like pick those pieces of media apart and, figure out, is this here to make us fear, or is this here to inform us? And you go from there. And I'm hoping with this series that people start to learn how to really rely on their intuition and critical thinking to figure out what's true and what's not out here. Because as Elena has been saying a lot on her YouTube channel, there are people that are still out here trying to disinform, and I've come across them. I've come across the media. I won't say any particular names, but with the AI and all of that stuff, I've seen it on TikTok. I've seen it on, TV, subscription services and stuff like that. So I'm really trying to help people understand, like, as they get into the spiritual journey, like, what do you need to be looking out for? It's so funny because Thoth the Atlantean mentions it in the Emerald Tablets, like, do not be persuaded by the dark light. People pretending to be these positive, people and influences, like the Galactic Federation of Light. Like, don't fall for that. Look within. You already have all the answers yourself. Use your discernment and you'll be good.
That's it. Look within. It's a within. Too many people spend all their time looking out, hanging on to every little word everyone else says, when the answers of the universe are all within you. It's written on your soul. It's, transcribed in your genetics. It's all there. We have everything we need, and that's wonderful what you're doing. I love your videos. I watch them all the time. So informative. And you're really good at taking all of this information and putting it together. What everyone in the disclosure community, especially our community, we are the disclosure community, what all the players are saying and putting it all in an easy way to process. You take this complex stuff, you put it all together, and you make this beautiful illustration. I love your page, and you're helping a lot of people out there, and that's great. And Josh, any final words or questions for Jade before we head out?
It was awesome having you on tonight, Jade.
Oh, thank you. I was a little nervous, not gonna lie.
You did great.
Yes, it was a great time, and hey, we are the disclosure. That's what we're doing, and we're trying to make it happen, and so are you, and you've been, guided by your guides. That's why we call them guides, right? Why would we call them guides if they just came out and hung out with us? They want to be guiding us anywheres. They guide us into our past and what we need to be doing, and, Josh and I, we're called to be doing what we're doing, helping people get their stories out there. You're called to get out there and help provide information and help separate things to allow people to have their own understanding of their own realities and experiences, and to use discernment to make their own decisions and connect. It's a beautiful thing. And we are the disclosure. So everyone, make sure you go in the description, check out her links down there below. Make sure you check her out, subscribe to her page, like all of her videos, leave a bunch of comments, and make sure that you set a reminder for her up-and-coming videos. Also, you can find Josh and my email in the description, along with our merchandise, the Spotify, and the Facebook group. We are the Disclosure, and all the other links as well. A lot of information between Josh and I down there. So go check it out, but make sure before checking out our stuff, you go check out her page first. So that's all I'm asking all of you. And once again, we hope to see you all next week. Thank you so much, Jade. I really appreciate everything you're doing. incredible story, and your, the clairvoyance you had and intuitions and things like that. Truly incredible. And I hope that someday all of us can be more tapped into that, so you won't be as unique or rare. We all need to catch up. Josh and I, we got to catch up, and we got to get there. And I want to start, seeing these things more. But you said it, Jade, you have to seek. So that's a reminder, everyone out there, keep seeking, don't give up. The pursuit of knowledge is never ending. You'll never master it. So keep going. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Talk to you all later. Bye.
All right.
Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to set a reminder for up-and-coming videos. If you have had an experience, please email us at orderoflight777@gmail.com or wearethedisclosure88@gmail.com. If you would like to contact our special guests, information can be found in the description. Make sure to check out the We Are the Disclosure podcast radio on Anchor FM. For additional information, socials, and online store, go to the direct me link in the description. Whistleblowers, experiencers, and contactees of all backgrounds, now is the time to come forward. Please subscribe, share, and give the video a big thumbs up. We are not waiting for the disclosure. We are the disclosure. See you next time.